The American dream is alive in Florida's classrooms, where every child is given the opportunity to fulfill their God-given potential. Students from every walk of life, all across the state, are held to the same high academic standards. The result, many are exceeding expectations. According to the nation's report card, the majority of Florida's Hispanic fourth graders are scoring above the national average in reading and math. In fact, Florida's Hispanic fourth graders are reading as well or better than the average student in 31 states and the nation's capital. That's right, better than the average in more than half the U.S. And more Hispanic students are taking advanced classes to prepare for college. What's Florida's secret? An unwavering commitment to bold reforms that prepare students for a lifetime of success. Today's students will determine our destiny as a country. Excellence in education. If Florida can do it, every state can do it. Join the movement to transform education for the 21st century.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. We do want you to keep on eating. But I just wanted to speak very quickly about that video that probably nobody paid attention to, but that's fine, because I'll tell you what it said. That short video just talked a little bit about how some states, and Florida in particular, has been able to close, or not totally close, but very much narrow the achievement gap when it comes to Hispanic students, low-income students. In fact, one of the statistics in there that I'm personally very proud of is that our fourth grade Hispanic students in Florida outperform all students in 31 states, which I think is something that we should all be very proud of. I'm a state senator in Florida, a newly elected state senator. I was in the state house previously, and that makes me very proud to hear those those statistics from Florida. But what I just wanted to talk to you about very briefly was that if Florida can do it, every single state can do it. And Governor Bush alluded to that this morning. I thought it was one of the best parts of the speech this morning when he said, "What are the rest of you doing about it? We know some states are doing things. What are the other states doing about it?" In Florida, we are a majority-minority state. We have a very high Hispanic population. We also have a very high poor population, students that are very low income. And if okay, I guess I'm going to stop talking. Now, I just wanted to make a couple of brief points, and that is that it's important for us to close that achievement gap amongst Hispanic students, African American students, and all students. And the reason why is not just because it's morally important. This is something that, as we've heard time and time again, it is absolutely crucial for us to close that achievement gap. It's something that it might not be very fun to do as a policymaker. Those of you around the table that are policymakers know that when you have these debates, it's not the fun thing to do. It might not be the politically popular thing to do, but it's something that we must do. We must go and we must move forward with these big, bold ideas. We must move forward and say that it is no longer acceptable to believe that some students can't learn. That's a theme that we heard this morning, and I think we'll continue to hear, and that is that all students can learn. And across every state and across every group, you will hear in different ways being said that certain students, be it because of the way that they look, because their last name ends in a vowel, because their skin's a little darker, that those students can't learn. And quite frankly, that is absolutely not only not the case, but it's unacceptable. Because when you ask students to achieve more, when you ask students to do more, they will do more. It is us as adults that are setting those low expectations. It's those people that are not in this room, but other adults across the country that are binding students to those low expectations. So it's something that we must do. And like I said, it's not just something that we have to do because it's morally the right thing to do, but it's something that we have to do for the vitality of our economy in our entire country. As we start to see some more census numbers come out, we will see that our nation is becoming a majority-minority country. That is what we are becoming. So when we see things like closing the achievement gap, it's not just something that we should do because it sounds nice and it's a nice soundbite. The fact is, that we do not close the achievement gap in our nation will not be able to compete with other countries across the world. And we know that our competitors and our kids' competitors are not in Florida, kids from Alabama or in Georgia. It's our kids are competing with kids from Singapore, from all across Europe, from all across Asia. If we do not close our achievement gap, then our nation will be paying the price this generation and for future generations to come. So just wanted to make sure that we spend some time this afternoon just talking a little bit about that. And I want to say to all the policymakers that are here today, don't be afraid. It's something that it's not popular, it's not a lot of fun, it's gonna cause a lot of heartburn. But I can tell you that when you have a parent come to you, when you have a student come to you and thank you because finally their diploma means something, that moment is worth every single moment of heartburn that you had when you were standing on the floor of your legislature debating and having this debate. And as a nation, as we come together and see that future generations will benefit because of the work that we're doing today, we all know that we're going to be doing the right thing. So thank you very much for your time, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your lunch.
Absolutely inexorably tied to our education level.
What we have to do is turn socially acceptable into world-class competitive.
How much focus is there on the average level in the United States?
AP World History,
AP Computer Science,
Fine Art,
Physics,
Economics.
I took topics in calculus 2 last year, and this year I'm taking game theory.
Countries that choose to excel at education will be the successful countries. Everybody else is going to fall back.
So much. I just want to start by asking, I've met most of you before. How many of you somewhere in your education went to public school? Show of hands. Everyone. Let's start in reverse alphabetical order, because in school you never got to go first, Mort. Would you talk a little bit about something from your public education background that changed your life? I happen to know in your case you went to private and public school, but you left private to go to public school and you liked it better.
Well, I left the private school for the same reason I enjoyed the public school. I had great teachers in the public school, particularly in history, and it just transformed the way I looked at the world and the way I looked at education. So to my mind, the best part of it was great teachers, and that's what I was lucky enough to have in the high school that I attended.
Bill?
I would agree with Mort. You know, for me, I go back to Mrs. Hogan, my 7th grade history teacher, and I messed up really bad. I did really well on the first test. And then, you know, kind of like any seventh grade boy, you kind of slack off as the year goes on. She called my mother. And, you know, two of them started plotting against me, and the next thing you know, I did well in history.
Best thing that ever happened
right.
here. Kathleen?
I, too, left Catholic school to go to public school, basically because I wanted to play volleyball and get off of the tar-covered courts that we used to play on to get into a gym. But also, Beth Frucci, I mean, the range of my public education was then to go on to public education in college. And Beth Frucci, who was my math teacher in junior year, really instilled in me a love of numbers and a love of data that I, you know, still treasure to this day.
Ed?
Basically, public schools, K through 12. And I look a little like Bill. It wasn't necessarily history. It was over in a civics course in 7th grade that I had a teacher that for whatever reason, took a liking to me that had a profound impact on my later learning. Had that not happened, I may not be sitting here today.
Bill?
I started off going to a public school, then I went to a Catholic school, then I went back to public school, then I went to another public school. That was K through 6, and then I went to the same private school from 7th through 12th, and it was at that school that I really found my home. And that's why I'm such a big believer in choice.
Cesar?
I went to a public elementary school and then transferred to a Catholic high school. For me, I think the big thing that stuck out, I learned from a very early teacher the importance of reading a newspaper every single morning, and it's one of those lessons I took throughout elementary, junior, and high school, and still remember that teacher today for a very valuable lesson.
Let's start in the obvious place. What is the greatest challenge that you are all finding that is facing American business when it comes to assembling a high-quality workforce? And Bill, I'm going to start with you because Walmart is one hell of a big workforce.
It is 1.3 million in the U.S., and the biggest challenge we face is with people. And finding enough capable, interested, motivated people to fill the stores is the big challenge. We have, to do some training and development with people, as you would imagine, as technology continues to advance. You can't even get your schedule if you can't log on and operate online. That's how you get your schedule. We now use radio frequency identification chips in some of our apparel tags to keep track of inventory. So the technology needs just to work in a retail store are far greater than they ever were.
Are you getting the kinds of candidates you need for those jobs?
Not nearly enough. Not nearly enough. And part of the education process are the fundamentals of education, but there's also the disciplines of showing up on time, respecting authority that you learn in a school environment that can be challenging as well.
Ed, I see you nodding your head over there.
Well, like Bill, in finding people with the requisite skills, and in coming out of the school system, I'm not looking for a completed product. I'm looking for a young person coming in who has fundamental skill sets in terms of critical thinking, communication, teamwork, brings to the job or to the application an intellectual curiosity and excitement and a desire to learn more. And one of the things we quickly learn today that the skill sets we might currently possess are going to be inadequate in a couple of years. So school may end at some set period in time, but learning never does. And that's why it's so critical to make sure in young people coming through our education system are developing those skills where they can continue to grow and develop and expand their skill set, their capacity to be able to meet whatever the world holds in time for us.
Well, here's the question then. We know what you need, but Mort, what's your candid assessment of the average American high school student or college student that you see coming out?
Well, one of the things that I look for in some of the publications that I'm involved with is people who can write and write clearly and, if I may say so, to be brief and bold in the way they write. That's a very difficult commodity or talent in a lot of the people. I think it's probably true in the area of technology as well. But I think the real sad fact about our educational system is we're not producing enough people of the quality that we need in terms of either the businesses or projects that I'm involved with, and I suspect it's true across this table, and that is a real challenge for America.
Cesar, you're in communication too. Tell me, give it to me straight. What are the kids like that you see coming out?
Yeah, no, we certainly see the challenges that our students are having coming out of the school system. I'll tell you from a specific vantage point that we look at the Latino community. There are states like Florida that have done an incredible job over the last 10 years, but nationwide, the numbers that we're seeing in the Latino community are staggering. About 50% of Hispanic high school students are graduating. That's way lagging the overarching graduation rate. And the few that actually are going on to college, only about 30% are graduating from college. So we are seeing a community that is the driving force of the demographic growth of this country that is not graduating students with competitive skill sets at any level. What we look for at the end of the day is individuals that are going to be what we call great athletes, people that have complete skill sets that can grow into their different job functions. And in the Latino community, we are just not seeing enough critical mass of those students coming out of the college process.
Bill, how about for you?
You know, I would say my experience has been the case of the haves and the have-nots. At our firm, which is about 30 people, we are able to hire the best and the brightest in the country, extraordinary talent, extraordinary educations. And then I look at some of the companies that we've been involved in. Our timber company, which is the largest private landowner in the country, we had people in our plants in Louisiana who could not read beyond third grade level. Third grade level, poor minority. We sent them back to school, and they had been there a long time. But as the business was becoming more sophisticated, they were not even going to be able to keep those jobs that they had unless we educated them, and that's pathetic.
Mort, you wanted to add one thing?
Yeah, one of the great things about America, in a sense, is that it's been a job machine for most of its history. But agricultural jobs were replaced by manufacturing jobs, and we have lost now a huge portion, over 5 million manufacturing jobs in the first decade of this century. And the jobs that are going to be created and the jobs of the future are going to involve a much higher level of education and the ability to apply that education. And you don't have the sense that this country is adjusting to it in terms of the educational system. I think it's a great challenge because otherwise you're going to find a lot of people literally without the ability to earn a living. And that would be a transforming event in a country that has been as optimistic as this country has always been in terms of the fact that the next generation can do better than the current generation.
Kathleen?
Jamie, I'd just like to add, because I know the audience here is a group of activists, and you're based as looking for ideas to take away from today. And I think one of the things that my companies use, we have to train a lot of people that come in to deal with equipment operators and how to actually do the logistics of the movement of product from site to site. And it's really important. We have a program in Florida called Florida Ready to Work, and it came out of the legislature. It's got funding, and they work with this transitional time of companies and how to give skill sets to employees. And I would have you research that program, and if you don't have it, figure out ways to implement it.
Bill?
Jamie, one other point, and I think it's important. We were talking about individuals and how individual education is critical. And so averages, the average high school student or the average college student, averages in business will kill you. We have some absolutely fabulous people that come out of school very well prepared, as Bill said, to work. There's just not enough of them. And I wanted to be clear of that because we can't look at averages, we have to look at each individual student.
Well, give me some specifics. I mean, you have some great, but how many? Give me a percentage of these candidates, if you have to be candid.
It's a bell curve, much like anything in business. And if you, with your workforce, just like with your business, and this applies to those of you who manage teachers or educators, if you can't improve your workforce by figuring out how to upgrade the bottom of the bell curve and move them to the center or to the top half of the bell curve, you can never progress. But if you can figure out how to take the last 2 standard deviations off and move them to the middle, you progress the bell curve and you actually can advance your workforce, your educator group, your student group. And I think that's the issue for us, is that we have to move the center of the bell curve, and we're not doing that today with the system of education that we have.
Ed?
Well, I might more made the comment on manufacturing. You look at manufacturing today compared to 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and you have pictures of kind of a dark, dingy building, a lot of noise activity. Today you go in very clean, almost septic, and the level of technology in the skill set in terms of the workers on the line coming in varying degrees of Six Sigma development, black belt at least, and how that plays in, and what we have to make sure from an education standpoint that we are bringing young people in and developing them with the skill set so that when they seek a job, they've got fundamental learning skills, and then that can be applied and they can grow within be it manufacturing, service, whatever the business might be.
Ed, what is the one thing that you see missing in the candidates that are coming to you?
Oftentimes when it comes through, and not to digress a minute, what really got me into the whole education issue was a good number of years ago. We give, as most companies, a pre-employment battery, just kind of screen out who's got it, who doesn't. And we were screening out probably 50% of kids coming in.
50%.
Because of some fundamental skills. One of my senior officers came in and said, we got to quit doing it. Must be something with the test. And I pushed back, and he came back a few weeks later. His son had applied and did fine on the test. And he was asking his son, well, is it that difficult? He said, Dad, it's fairly simple. It's just math and some reasoning, thinking questions. I thought it was a breeze. There's nothing wrong with it, which caused his dad to think, whoa, maybe we have something, a bigger issue than just a pre-employment matter. And, you know, this, as I look at the skills and coming through, it's looking at math, the reasoning, the critical thinking skills you get with algebra. I know of nobody who loved algebra when they went through school, but it's that first stage of that critical thinking skill. And as you come in, you look at the complexity of the issues that business deals with today, you've got to have that fundamental skill coming in. And I don't see enough emphasis on, particularly on the math and the science.
Kathleen, you wanted?
I was just going to say, I think that goes right into STEM, you know, which is the science and math platform that many of us have worked on, again, in Florida from a state board perspective, but also, you know, and when we talk about STEM, it's really about taking 5 or 6 really specific things and passing them. You have to take science and math in every class. Teachers have to be certified in math and science. Working with your legislatures, passing those specifics, because again, to Ed's point, and all of us that are hiring, those are the sort of education platforms that allow us to get the critical thinking employees that then we can hire and not have to retrain, and they can grow within the companies that they join. And STEM is really competitively, globally, we are way behind. And it is just something, again, that there are many takeaways of legislation that we focused on in Florida down into 3 credits, 4 credits, that is all available online, that I would just encourage you to really look at and sort of be bold and pass, legislate.
But you still have those foundational needs from K through 6 before you even have the chance to really get into more
But we have science and math in every class, It's mandated. It's expected. Teachers have to be qualified. I mean, it is just, it's part of a core part of education.
Let's just, to follow up on that, we all know that India and China are incredibly focused in this area. How do you think American students can be competitive in these areas with the STEMs? Anyone?
Some students are very competitive. Unfortunately, those are not the ones we're talking about today. It's the ones that are left behind. You know, it's fascinating. You go in, one of my colleagues traveling in China not long ago, you go into a 3rd grade and you ask a 3rd grade student, why are you here? And they respond, I'm here to improve myself, to help my family, and to make China great. You walk into a 3rd grade classroom and ask a 3rd grader in this country, why are you here? You'll probably get a blank stare or something, I don't know. Point being the level of focus and intensity around that. And an understanding, and this is part of, you know, as we look at what has made the United States a great country, has been the recognition that education drives opportunity, drives growth, drives prosperity. And unfortunately, if we are not giving kids the tools to be able to grow and develop, then we are starting to slide backwards.
Bill?
You know, I think we can be competitive again, but we aren't going to be competitive unless we allow there to be competition in education. And we heard about this from Superintendent Pasternak this morning. It's what so many of us have worked in this room for so long. And the states are laboratories, as Jeb Bush talked about. But let me give you one specific example. The state of Wisconsin, where there is a longstanding voucher plan in Milwaukee. It's capped at 20,000 students. Today, when it started, there were no charter schools. Out of the 100,000 K through 12 kids in that state, in that city, 20,000 are in vouchers. It is fully subscribed. 30,000 are in charters, and 50,000 are in traditional public schools. The graduation rates have improved for the traditional public schools from about 40% to 50%. The charters are around 70%, and the voucher schools are at 65% and going up every year. We happen to have, we have family income limits. The average family income is $16,000 for the kids in the voucher schools. That's the average family income, and we are funded at $7,000. The charters are funded at $8,500, and the public schools are funded at about $12,000. If you go to Racine, 2 charter schools, Racine, Wisconsin. Madison, 3 charter schools, no voucher schools, no real choice. So when you have choice, it raises all boats. And that's what we need to see happen more all across the country. Then we're going to have better outcomes, because there's nothing wrong with the kids, and there's nothing wrong with most of the parents, because most of the parents really do care about those kids, or they have some advocate in their lives who do. And then we're going to see better outcomes.
Cesar?
Yeah, the only point I'd add is I think the issue of giving the students relevancy to this skill set. And one of the strategies that we've implemented is role models, particularly in our community. Sometimes the students lack the vision to see how what they are learning today, particularly on the science and technology front, how that translates to their future success and how it's going to change their lives. And so I think in some cases, to tell a junior high or an elementary school student that Facebook was developed by someone that became an expert in these areas, that becomes relevant to them. In other words, for them to be able to see how they can translate these skills into visions, into dreams of theirs, that becomes more relevant. So the role model aspect, particularly I think in minority communities, is extraordinarily important, something we try to implement.
Let's talk about innovation a minute. As business leaders, you know how important it is. Bill, you're the man who brought us the $4 prescription at Walmart. But would you talk a little bit about technology? A lot of these classrooms still look like the classrooms that you grew up in. What kinds of innovations that you're seeing in the business world do you think can be brought into the classroom? Bill, you want to start?
I think that the lifeblood of any organization, and particularly ours, is innovation, and innovation requires bold leadership. Sam Walton took a business model that, was I bought it for $1, I'm going to sell it for $2, 100% margin, and turned retailing upside down. And it wasn't without risk. His first store was closed after 2 years because he lost his lease. Stuff like that happens. So innovation requires leadership, and it requires challenge, and it requires chance, and it requires commitment. Technology is everywhere today, and we don't even know what 10 years technology would be like. And I'll get the numbers wrong, but I think I read a statistic where it said that the adaptation of the computer took 10 years, and of the cell phone took 5 years, and of iPads took a year. And if you sort of take that acceleration of technology, we can't even imagine what education or technology will be like in the workforce in 10 years. And so our students need to be not only trained in that, but they need to be taught how to learn, because in addition to learning, they're going to have to learn the new technology as it comes down the road. And technology in the classroom can be everything that it is in the workforce. Today, we have, as I was saying, we have radio frequency identification tags. We have satellite television broadcasts to every store in the system. We can do that. It can be done anywhere and everywhere if we commit ourselves to it. As Bill said, the money exists in the system. The students are committed. The parents are committed. It's just going to require leadership to make it happen.
Mort, you're involved with a school where technology is being used. You want to?
Yes. Let me just say, I don't feel the any sense of despair over what the United States can do. We were the leaders in mass education in the world for decades and centuries even. I mean, high schools, we were the leaders in mass college education. It seems to me that in order to get to where we want to get, we are going to have to find a way to introduce technology as, in a sense, a force multiplier in terms of multiplying the capacity of teachers to particularly the best teachers, because if there is one thing that we've all known from all the material we've read and what our experience has been, the most critical ingredient in education is the quality of the teacher. And if we can find a way to get the best teachers and the great teachers, in a sense, using technology to spread their capacities and their talents and their unique teaching skills to more and more schools, I think we have the chance to do it. In fact, that's what's going on. Joel Klein, who is the chancellor of the school system of New York for at least another 10 days, but has been there for a decade and had an enormous effect on it, is a very good friend of mine and managed to persuade me with my elbow somewhere back up here that we ought to try and fund and develop that kind of innovative school. And it's called the iSchool for that reason, using technology. And I've been in that in those classes where you have teachers from other schools teaching history or other courses in this school. And this is a technology that can spread the one thing that is going to be in short supply no matter what, which is great teachers. And technology is a force multiplier of that. And that's somehow or other something we've got to find a way to spread throughout the country. I think that is the key to the future of education in the United States.
Ed, I know you love calculus.
Maybe at one time, not. No, there's a side story to that. You know, one of the things is we look in, be it with technology or what, data. Tracking, you know, longitudinal data with kids and following so we know what's happening and we know it almost as close as we can real time. As opposed to waiting until the end of the school year and realize, boy, so-and-so, they never did get it. I thought they did and they didn't. What do you do now? Well, it's kind of a difficult spot to be in. Following along, and be it through assessments, however you might want to be able to do that, but watching individual student achievement, watching class achievement, watching school achievement, so you can identify where you have a problem early on and address it then, as opposed to 2 years later looking back, oh, I didn't realize we had a problem. These are things that, you know, more and more studies and data being used, data-driven decisions. That'd be one of the biggest things coming out from the business community in looking at business analytics, just what we can do with the technology and tracking and following trends can be most helpful from an educator standpoint in helping to elevate the level of student achievement.
Bill?
You know, I think technology has the potential to be the great disruptor here, with the greatest potential of perhaps anything that is out there. Giselle Huff is doing a tremendous amount of work on this, and at price points of between $5,500 and $6,000 a student, dramatically lower than what we are spending today in every state. So if you have to have early adopters, though, to any of these things. And the public schools will dig in on this, in my opinion. But I think where there's the greatest potential of this is in the Catholic schools today, where we have 1.2 million empty Catholic school seats in the urban cities in the United States. We have erected a Berlin Wall in our own society, and they have to operate at that $5,000 to $6,000 price point, and they serve the poorest kids in the country, and technology can make it happen for them.
Kathleen?
I'd just like to say, if anybody has a technology problem, who do you go ask? The 8-year-old, the 10-year-old in the airport, on your street, in your house, and they can solve that problem. So this is not a child's issue. This is a systems issue. We need to go digital. We need to blow up these textbooks. We need to have teachers from all over teaching the children to the best of their capacity.
Cesar, did you want to add something on technology? When you're hiring people and you're looking for employees, do the students coming to you, do the candidates have the technological skills that they need to have?
I think that's probably one of the. I think that's probably one of the strongest skill sets that we're seeing. I can tell you in our new media business, particularly the interactive and the mobile side of the business, we are looking to that young generation for all of that innovation. And that skill set, the students coming through the system now are just learning differently than we had been in the past. And they are capturing information in ways that, frankly, I or many of our leadership just don't see it that way. And so I think creating an environment that rewards innovation, that rewards calculated risk is pivotal. And that's the environment we're trying to create with some of these young folk that are coming through when it comes to the development of new media platforms.
How many of you are having to train or retrain employees when they come in?
Ongoing.
You are. Ed, is there something that schools could be doing, stepping up, so that you're not doing that?
Well, I think some of this isn't so much through the K through 12. You still have to have those fundamental skills for lifelong learning. But as you come back and you look, workforce development and growth is really should be the sweet spot for community colleges, junior colleges, as well as other programs to where, be it through certificates or something that I can go out, my current specialty is becoming obsolete. So how can I go out, take a course and get a certificate in something else, in wireless technology or what Bill's talking about with IF technology and using it in retail or so, that I can get a certificate. Finding those methods or avenues for lifelong learning is critical.
Mm-hmm. Bill?
I think the desire for lifelong learning and the skills to be a lifelong learner are some of the things that we could get from the education system that we're not. As we struggle to teach kids the basics, we're also not teaching them how to learn. And that's what we look for when we hire. And we hire the entire gambit from graduate degrees to entry level, high school or no high school, in fact, required. And what we look for is the capability to learn. We don't expect them to necessarily know how to run all our systems, but we need to see that they have the ability to grow and to learn. And to that end, we developed a program that we launched last year that is lifelong learning and takes the jobs that we have and has them evaluated for college credit, so that you can work in our cash office, which are the people who do the accounting at the store level, and get credit for basic accounting. Because you really need to know that because you've learned it, and then have that applied to the advancement of your degree. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the element that is absolutely critical to the workforce, just learning how to learn.
Kathleen, if there was one thing you could have schools do, I'm talking about high school education, middle school, that would better prepare for your workforce, it would be?
I think to establish a lifelong learning, that it's not, we hire a whole range of people in our company, and it is really about having people feel like learning is a good thing because it's going to be a way to advance, to get more money, to get a promotion, to do other things. That it's not a judgment, because they're not going to come in and know exactly what we do, but that they come in, they're hired, and that they're challenged to think, okay, I want to be better, and that's an opportunity for them. And it really needs to be flipped back to them believing in themselves. So I would say either confidence or an establishment of lifelong learning as a real goal.
Let's talk a little bit, let's scare everybody a little bit. Ed, what are the immediate and the longer-term implications that you see for American business and our country as a whole if we're unable to turn around the dropout crisis right now?
Well, I think there are a couple of key issues. One, if we don't reverse the dropout issue and graduate more of our kids, the goal would be to graduate all of our kids at a high level of academic achievement coming out of the 12th grade. That ought to be our goal, should be our goal. If we do not do that, then it will continue, it will put the country at a competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis the world, and it will also start having a more profound negative impact economically on the country from the standpoint of people coming into the workforce without the skills or who are not unemployable are a drag on growth, are a drag on the overall health of the economy. And once you start down that path, it is very difficult to turn it around. And this is why coming through in looking at from a public policy standpoint, we can think about maybe the first thing we need to be out there is getting jobs and driving economic growth. What drives those is really education. And a dear friend of mine, when he ran for governor, ran as a jobs governor, and realized, you know what, I've got it wrong. And came back the second time in running and ran as an education governor. And realized, and the rest is history. It's recognizing education drives the opportunity, drives the success, be it of a school district, of a community, a state, a country, of a business.
Bill, you want to come?
Well, Thomas Jefferson said you must have an educated populace to have a democracy. When people feel that they cannot participate because they don't have the skills to in the life of the country, they are going to become frustration. That frustration will spill over, and we will have anarchy. That's what's at stake here, and it's in process. This isn't out in the future. It is what is going to happen now. We're seeing the beginnings of it, and if we don't do stem this tide very quickly, we aren't going to have a country.
Mort?
I think if Thomas Jefferson were alive today, he would say, not that I want to say that I know what he's going to say, but as long as I'm being asked, he would say, if you don't have an educated population, you won't have an economy. I mean, we are in a world now where natural resources and muscle power plays a completely different role in the growth of our economy and the development of our economy. I mean, one of the things that drives me nuts is the fact that close to 50% of the graduate students in the hard sciences, all the technology and engineering, etc., are foreign students. And we do not allow a lot of them to stay in this country. They go to other countries, and they are not only, they do not destroy jobs, they create jobs. Andy Grove wrote a column in which he pointed out that the computer, which was developed and discovered in the United States, we only have 166,000 jobs in that industry today. 1.5 million jobs that are manufacturing these computers are abroad. We've got to find a way to understand what is going on in this economy, because that ultimately is going to undermine everything if we don't have a viable economy that, in a sense, can support what we've always had. We don't have, it's not natural resources in the traditional way that we benefited from, or other things. Now it is education that is the foundation of what a healthy economy is going to be, and we must actually understand that as a country. It's not enough just to sit around with a group of people like this who are educated. We need the political leadership, which has been too rare in terms of focusing on this issue, to focus the country on this issue. And we don't have all that time anymore, it seems to me. We are faced with a very critical competitive problem in terms of maintaining our economy. The jobs that we have lost are not coming back. The manufacturing jobs are not coming back. The jobs that are going to come back are those that are going to have a much higher component of skills and educational-based skills. And if we don't absorb that in terms of where we are in the next decade, I think we're going to have a very, very difficult time in this country. It's the most critical issue facing this country. And I think education is the absolute core of where we're going to be in the next decade or two.
Cesar?
Yeah, I would just add a couple of quick points. First is, I think this issue of urgency is so important. I'll tell you from our perspective at Univision, we have identified this issue of education as the single biggest issue that we think faces not only our country, but also our community. And we launched an initiative called Es el Momento, which means now is the time. Literally, the message we're trying to send is this issue of urgency. We cannot wait to begin to address this issue. Today, as many of you know across the country, and this is a national number, 1 in 4 kindergarten students today are of Latino descent. And when you extrapolate the challenges that we have in this community, add to it other minority communities and the like, that's not a Latino issue, that's an American issue. And we need to make sure that we as a country, we as a community, but we as a private sector take it very seriously. And I think my second point would only be to the attendees in the room today, which is I would encourage everyone to think of the private sector, as we all know, is just one part of the potential solution. But I think increasingly we have to look to creative partnerships between the private sector and the different constituencies that are contributing to the solutions here. And so I think it's important that we start to think more creatively and more proactively about how the private sector can partner with the different constituencies.
Kathleen.
Cesar, I was just going to jump on that point. I think that, you know, there are accoladers, as I call them, in Florida, from the business community to the chamber to even, you know, Manhattan Institute came down and studied a lot of the things in Florida, or the Florida Council 100, which is our business advisory group. So find those existing groups in your states and work with them and get them as motivated about creating competition. I mean, I think the one thing from a business, we compete for every job we win. You go out and you got to fight for that job, and you got to be competitively advantaged. And we need to make sure that the education system that we all in our way touch and feel and are trying to build and change is competitively advantaged for that child. And I think that there are lots of different component parts that you're going to learn about in the next day and a half, but take all of that away as really action-oriented, be bold, pass legislation, try it. If it doesn't work, go back and fix it the next time.
We're going to open it up to Q&A, but I just want to end with one last question, which has to do with Kathleen's bold. I'd like each of you, successful leaders have to take chances, and sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose. If you could leave our audience today with one piece of advice about leadership that you think might help them in going forward with this. Mort, you want to start?
Well, I guess I would, to go back to what I think is a central point here in terms of education, is to find some way to make teaching an absolutely central concern of everybody, and to find ways to attract and hold great teachers in our system. That, to me, is the most important thing to do to transform the education in this country.
Bill?
Yeah, I think leaders lead, and everybody here is a leader in this topic. It's a giant jigsaw puzzle, and it's one actually that is, like the governor said in his opening remarks, I'm actually optimistic about, because all of the parts to the puzzle are there. There aren't missing parts. It's not as if we don't have the money, or we don't have the students, or that we don't have the will to do it. We just have to put the parts together, and that requires leadership. And everybody here is a leader, so when somebody fails, in business we keep score. In fact, every quarter there's an announcement whether we did well or we didn't do well. And we either get paid because we did well, or we get booted because we didn't do well. And that's the accountability that needs to be in the system. That's the accountability of everybody in this room. Waiting for Superman, I got news for you, you're Superman. That's it, you got to do it.
Kathleen.
I'm going to share one story. When I was working for the governor, you know, he was up for re-election, first incumbent Republican governor ever to try to run for office again. And he and John Wynn were in his office, and he comes into my office and he's like, you know, we're going to do social promotion. I'm like, that means we're not going to pass third graders if they don't read at the right level and test at the right level. I was like, can we just do that next year? Like, get through the He's like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's leadership. That's clear leadership about an issue that was not even debatable. I was not a leader at that moment in time, but I was empowered to be a leader and to not take no and to not walk away from opportunities like that, and to be bold and decisive when the opportunity presents itself. So I just challenge you all to do that in every one of the areas in the states and the districts that you represent, because it will matter and it does work.
Ed.
Following up on Kathleen's comments, I think the point, you know, being bold, being aggressive, how many times have you done something, you look back, you know, I should have pushed a little harder, could have gotten it, it was not that difficult, and we got it. Had I pushed twice as hard, which I didn't think was possible at the time, think where we'd be today. So along that
point, too often we tend to pull up short on really what would be that bold, profound change. We look at some may agree or disagree with what went on here in the district with the education system the last couple of years. Some bold changes that basically have positioned the district in a better position than it would have been had they not been taken. So it's the old adage you think as a little kid, do you pull that Band-Aid off a little at a time, or you just go ahead and rip it off? It may be painful for a few seconds, but it's over and done. Be bold.
Bill.
Yeah, I would define leadership as how you get other people to follow who may not be inclined to do so. And a lot of that comes from working with people willing to be able to reach across the aisle. As Jeb was talking about this morning, how do you get people to coalesce around this issue? Well, you get them to do so because this is about kids. And you talk about the children, and that's who this really is all about. And it can't be about adults, and it can't be about job preservation. So you have to define it that way. And then I think the other aspect of this, which has been echoed by the other panelists so far, but it's something George Schultz taught me, who's been involved with this issue for decades now. He said, you never get anything done politically unless there's a real or perceived crisis. And I think there is a sense today, and a lot of it's because this has been the year of documentaries, we have a crisis. And when you have those rare moments, you better seize them because they don't come along very often, and you better act boldly.
Cesar.
Thank you. The only thing I'd add is, I grew up a philosophy my parents taught me, which was very straightforward: dream big, work hard, stay humble. And I think the third one is very powerful because I think we as individuals can make a difference, but I think if leaders can figure out the way to set up an environment where the folks around them are equally, if not more passionate, and equally, if not more bold, to use the word as well, I think that's important. But with that, I think everyone that sets up that type of environment also needs to understand that you have to have a stomach for failure. Risk brings, in some cases, failure and lessons learned. And I think that's one of the tough aspects of leadership as well, is to have the stomach so that your team understands that you're going to stand behind them as long as they keep innovating and they're fast learners. Hopefully you all get there together.
Everyone, you want to give them a round of applause? Questions? I think we have a mic for, we have a mic? There we go.
Nobody's talked about teachers' unions. And Mr. Zuckerman, how would you deal with teachers' unions? Are they friend or foe?
The question is, how would you deal with teachers' unions? Are they friends or foe?
Both, but not necessarily in that order. This is a huge problem because the interests of the teachers' unions and their leadership may be very different, sad as it is to say, the interests of teaching. And that's a bureaucracy that has its own values and its own interests. I mean, I've been there where somebody said to one of the leaders of a teachers' union in New York City, you are a teacher. Your whole life was devoted to the teaching of children. How could you not support the idea of getting rid of bad teachers instead of just dealing with seniority? And the response was, I could never get elected if I took that approach. And that is a huge conflict between what is in the interests of the teachers' union and its leadership and the students. And somehow or other, there's got to be political leadership that deals with that. I mean, this is a thing that it's not easy, and you can't just go at them and just try and break them. You've seen what's happened in some cities, though, where you do get the political support for those leaders of the academic world in that community when they go up against the teachers' union. I mean, it's a huge problem that we're going to face, given the size of the teachers' union and, frankly, their political clout. But it has to be faced. There's just no choice.
Bill?
Oh
Mort, I think you've been a little too kind. I think the teachers' unions are an enormous problem, and it's not a problem with the teachers, it's a problem with vested interests. And I think you have to create alternative paradigms in order to get the unions to be responsive. I'll go back to Milwaukee as a case in point. Once there was a bill passed which was vehemently fought against by the unions, they then did things like there's no longer seniority placement in Milwaukee. They realized they couldn't put all the bad teachers in the same schools. They made these changes themselves. They began to offer tutoring programs because they realized they had to get the reading levels and math comprehension levels up in the public schools. Those things wouldn't have occurred if they hadn't been forced to make those changes. So I think you have to have forces from the outside to get the unions to change and modify their behavior. When they do so, then all things can improve. But left to their own devices, it won't happen.
Kathleen, both your parents were teachers.
I was the one that told my mom, do you know that part of your funds go to pay for political giving? And she said, no. And she asked to have that taken out. It was a huge issue in California way back when. But I'd say they were going to potential ally. And what I would compliment is that, you know, we all now know what a rubber room is. We did not know that, Joel, not that long ago. And not that that's a badge of honor, but it's a badge of education because there's a lot more transparency in the system now, so they can't hide. The race to the top that President Obama and Secretary Duncan are having out there as funds for states is requiring pay for performance. So it's been very interesting to see the union try to figure out what's their new color. We have to be diligent. You have to make sure that they are metrics measured and that it is transparent and that you're educating the parents. I listened to Eva Moskowitz in the panel this morning, Steve Burr from California. It is about educating and empowering the parents to challenge the unions and the politicians that protect them.
It's basically how do we make parents or help communities become better consumers of the education system? You know, in what kind of questions should I ask? We were talking about data earlier. What is out there? Why are our kids failing or the trends going down? Putting that information into the dialogue, it may not totally have a warm, fuzzy relationship with some of your opponents on things, but it sure raises the level of discourse and understanding in the community.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Susan Myers with the Foundation for Educational Choice, recently renamed from the Friedman Foundation. This is Milton Friedman's Legacy Foundation for School Choice. My question to each of you is, as CEOs, many of your corporations have outsourced jobs overseas to get better quality, better results. Why, as you as CEOs, have not spoken out about outsourcing education more, as in private schools, school vouchers, tax credits, charter schools, to get better quality in education today?
Okay, come on. Who's going to go?
What?
Oh, what?
It's a good question. I think it goes down to the discussion that we were having earlier is about choice and competition. We compete every day, every single day, and we keep score. And if you compete and you keep score, you will get better. And, you know, advocacy from the private sector to have private schools compete with public schools, absolutely. I think, I don't know how we do that. I guess it's a difficult question to answer, but I think every one of us would support that.
You know, you think we already have competition between schools. Most parents can sit down, or kids can tell whether or not the crosstown rivalry, you're going to beat them in football or basketball this year? You know how that goes, but when it comes down, how does it come along on your AP courses or just your Algebra 1, Algebra 2? How do you compare to the other school? They don't have a clue. How do we elevate the awareness in the community in terms of let's beat the socks off of our crosstown rival when it comes to the academic side of the equation, as opposed to just, what would you do at the middle halftime of the football game? Shut the scoreboard down. We're not going to score the second half. parents would be up in arms. Point trying to make, how do we focus on really that academic piece, that total, that balance?
Can't do that. It's un-American.
Un-American to shut down the scorecard, I know.
Bill?
Well, you know, the people who I've found who have been CEOs of companies who've been willing to speak out on this issue have by and large been entrepreneurs who started their own businesses, who are not beholden to unions. You have many people who are CEOs of large companies where they've got a lot of union issues, and this will make their business lives complicated to step out on this. And the unions control an awful lot of money that goes into politics. So this comes back to politics, and again, it goes back to how can you work to change that paradigm. Somebody who's done a magnificent job of this is John Kirtley in Florida, where 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 30 members of the Black Caucus, almost all Democrats, only 1 out of 30 voted for school choice. This year, 23 out of 30. Almost every member of the Hispanic Caucus voted for school choice. Because once you start it, then kids, their constituents begin to experience it, and they won't go back. But we've got to get CEOs to step out on this and take some risks. And they need to be more vocal, and they need to be more visible.
I would just, the only thing I would add is you should all dial into a Florida State Board of Education meeting if you really want to hear people. All of my fellow board members are for choice actively. 2 of us are CEOs on the panel, and we are welcome competition in Florida at every level, business and academics.
Well, I'm just going to use a particular illustration. A lot of money was passed out to support education in some of the various economic stimulus bills. But nothing was exacted, in a sense, as a price for this. I mean, for example, last in, first out remains one of the standards of school districts where there are unions. And yet, when huge amounts of money went to a lot of the urban school districts, there was no get from the teachers' unions on this. So it's not just the leadership in a community sometimes in dealing with an individual problem. It's really somehow rather a collective view that has to somehow or other focus in on the way our teachers are organized so that, in a sense, the students come first and not the institutional values of the unions. And I think that is something that is a very complicated issue, and it's just not going to happen overnight, and it cannot be done just in the form of total war, but somebody's got to really take the leadership from the public side and try and make that happen, if necessary over some time, but it's got to happen.
Another question.
Hi, I'm Mike Flanagan, State Superintendent in Michigan. And first of all, I want to thank you for distinguishing between teachers and the teacher unions and some of the other things. As a matter of fact, Joel, I'd like to say to you, I'm a New York City kid that if it wasn't for Miss Kubler, I wouldn't be State Soup. I'd be in prison or somewhere else. And it genuinely makes a difference for all of us. But here's part of the problem that, as I see it, as an aside, we're tying student achievement data to teachers, but also teachers to their teacher prep institutions. We produce more teachers in Michigan than anyone in the country, and some of them are lousy. And they finally have to step up and take some of the accountability for the preparation that hasn't been good. But the question I want to ask you is, 15 years ago I started, and as a real superintendent, I authorized a charter school at the Henry Ford Academy at Greenfield Village. And I know there's kids that have graduated from there whose lives are different than they would have been had they been in the Detroit school system. What I'm finding now is, as state superintendents, we have 150,000 people in our schools, teachers, principals, and superintendents, and they are competition averse. They chose these professions because they saw it as kind of the old line, get a retirement, not have to worry about being fired. And I'm trying to get, with this expertise here from those of you who thrive in a competitive environment, how we get our teacher prep institutions to select people that are more open to that, how we maybe do something with our existing 2 million teachers. Because the reason the unions are successful in driving fear into the average teacher is because they think it's all about just firing them, rather than taking the overwhelming number who are doing a great job and showing that they can make more money, that they can actually succeed. And I think maybe Paul or someone said it this morning that, you know, the competition will set them free. They just really don't believe it. And I'd really like to hear your view on how maybe we can help break that, because that's fundamentally the fear factor underlying a lot of the reforms.
Bill?
Yeah, I think managing any large organization, it's the same principles would apply. You keep score, you reward those that are good with better choice of roles, more pay, and you take care of the problems. It's not pleasant, and it takes courage, but if you keep score and you reward success and you deal with failure, you'll progress. And that's how you run business, and I think that same thing would apply. So find a way to reward, or first of all, you have to keep score. If you're not keeping score, none of it works. If the scoreboard of the football game's blank, it's hard to tell whether you're winning or losing or who's even good. And you have to do that first of all. And then aggressively reward success and just as aggressively manage those that aren't successful.
Good afternoon, panel. I'm Wayne Humphrey, the Vice President of the Central Florida YMCA. And my question is, how can we do a better job of not going it alone? So often, school districts are on an island by themselves, and other resources in the community could lend to the enrichment of school-age children. How can we do a better job of not going it alone?
My first stab at that would be use the technology, the internet, and reaching out through various programs, websites, organizations that do a lot of sharing of best practices, of getting away from the old, well, we need to evaluate, study, and develop a program locally. We won't pay any attention to what's going on outside. We'll do it, it's the old not invented here, whereas there are tremendous pockets of excellence across the country in being able to identify those and reaching out. We've done in Illinois at times where a local superintendent, I may have an attendance problem. And through, again, the data accumulation and availability can look, the school district over here had a similar problem, but they're doing much better. I wonder what they did, and I can reach out to a principal or to a fellow superintendent. What were you doing on school attendance? Or you moved some of your math scores up. What were you doing there? So it's one of the powerful things around the technology, it collapses the world down to your terminal.
One last question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Bruno Barron, Heartland Institute. I love the panel. I love everything you're doing. I think I'd like to get your comment on this. You can see the bifurcation of what's going on in the education reform movement right in front of us. You're talking about all of the necessary reforms that we need to drive the nation's education output into the future successfully, and yet at the same time you are utilizing all of the old structures and myths about superintendents and districts and teacher quality. The teacher quality myth is one of the things I'd like to particularly address, because it's like saying the key to writing a good state farm policy is the quality of our underwriters, when it really isn't. The quality of your product is the customers that come to buy it. And by doing the teacher quality focus, we're sitting in the old paradigm of caring about teachers when we ought to be caring about what are the standards and how do we get them in the face of the children. So I'm actually have a question, or I'm asking for a reply to this. The plea that I would have is that you use your talents and your corporate power and your wealth and the things that you have created and done to actually help the people in this room reverse and dismantle this system that has failed to work, and help us create the clout to build a new system that's necessary, as opposed to trying to save this system. It's beyond salvation.
Great point. Part of what we go through is how do you better understand the consumer today? And I think everyone up here, there is not some single consumer. The demographics, the spread in terms of how you connect with different age groups, ethnicity, however it might be, much more complex today than ever before. But focusing in on that customer, and while we typically do not think of a student as being a customer, they are. And how do we connect with them? Do we bring them into a classroom and use a blackboard or some form of electronics that they are more accustomed to? A blackboard versus I've got an iPad or I've got some kind of smartphone or mobile device that I communicate with all of my friends. Why can't we use that in the classroom and rethink through that? And part of it, you know, teacher development, teacher quality, it's the growth with the changing reality of the marketplace or the classroom. What going through back when I started 35 years ago in the business, you know, computers, that was something in a big room. You didn't have anything else. Or a little handheld calculator would cost you $400. You know, where today, you know, your frustration, what do I need to respond to? My iPhone, my iPad, or my BlackBerry? But trying to get people to think differently and to think really with the current reality. How you communicate with parents by email, or, you know, send out a teacher using Twitter and sending out an assignment or something to students, just or texting. It's part of that upgrading the thinking and skill set to be able to remain relevant to today's world.
Bill?
I agree with you, and I think we all recognize that incremental changes to the system aren't going to be effective. And a lot of things that we've discussed today are discussions about the inputs rather than the outcomes. And the outcomes, what we talked about, what the governor mentioned in his presentation this morning is a year for a year. That's the outcome. If we know that's the mission, we can build whatever we need to build to deliver a year for a year. Some of the things that we talked about are tactical and not strategic. The strategic outcome that we're all after is a year for a year, preferably better than that. We used to be able to deliver better than that. And I think if we set that as an objective and we build back from there, we'll at least know where we're going, and we have the ability to then manage the inputs to get to the end. And right now, incremental change isn't going to be good enough. And we've all recognized that. So we can tweak a teacher here or deal with a union there. But frankly, what you need is a reset button on this thing. And the system was very, very successful, as Mort said, for a very long time. Times have changed. Our competitors around the world have changed. Other countries have changed and adapted to what's happened. And we haven't done that yet. We need to do a reset. We know what the mission is. We have all the inputs available to us to do that. And we just need to sit down and figure it out.
Mort, you want to add something?
Well, I'll just beat the horse that I've been beating all this morning. I still think there's one game changer that is available, and that is technology. I think technology, if we can get academic programs that we can convey either visually on screens or through technology to the students and make it interactive, which I know we can do, I think that's the way we could change it. We could reduce going forward the number of teachers that we will need. We can pay the teachers more. We can get more flexibility out of the teachers when we pay them more. And technology is the one thing that I can see that can make all of this happen in the shortest period of time.
The only thing I would add is, and not to turn it back on you, is really you have to get involved, and I know many of you are, but get way involved. It is hand-to-hand combat. Pass legislation. If it doesn't pass, defeat the person that didn't pass it. Show the videos. Go out and educate the parents that are voters for the person that's sitting in the seat that's saying, I don't like choice. That is what it takes, and it's really, we can talk about it strategically, give you some tactical things that we deal with on a competitive landscape, but in terms of there's been some real movement forward, but it's minuscule to where we need to get to. And so I would just encourage you to get involved at every level that you can be. And I think if you ask a business in your local community how they can be helpful, they will stand with you and get involved, because we see it on our reinvestment on the employees that we have to retrain every day.
Thank you all so much. Thank our panelists again for being here.
Nice to meet you.